You're doing everything right. You're showing up, you're producing, you're hitting the goals. That on paper should mean you've made it. So, why does it still feel off? Why does it feel like no matter how much you accomplish, something deeper isn't being met? What if the problem isn't you? What if the problem is the game you're playing? Because most people aren't failing at life, they're succeeding at a game they never consciously chose to play. A game with a scoreboard that rewards speed, visibility, and constant output, but quietly ignores the things that actually make a life meaningful. And if you don't stop to question that scoreboard, you can spend years, even decades, winning at something that in the end doesn't count. Welcome to Passion Struck. Hi, I'm your host, John R. Miles, and on the show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of the world's most inspiring people and turn their wisdom into practical advice for you and those around you. Our mission is to help you unlock the power of intentionality so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you're new to the show, I offer advice and answer listener questions on Fridays. We have long-form interviews the rest of the week with guests ranging from astronauts to authors, CEOs, creators, innovators, scientists, military leaders, visionaries, and athletes. Now, let's go out there and become passion struck. I want to take you to a moment that changed everything for me. A moment that exposed the fraud of the scoreboard I was following. I was standing on a tarmac in Atlanta. I had just finished a 3-week global tour. At the time, I was reporting directly to the chief information officer and the chief financial officer of an internationally publicly traded multi-billion-dollar company. I was at the absolute top of the market production game. I had just come from Australia. That's 20 hours of flying, 20 hours of recycled air, layovers, and that deep, bone-weary exhaustion that settles into your marrow. But before I left Sydney, I sat down with the CFO and I asked him, "Do you have everything you need for the board meeting?" He looked me in the eye and he assured me he did. I flew 9,000 miles. I landed in Atlanta. I was desperate to see my family, to finally be present for my son and daughter, to feel like a human again. I turned on my phone as the plane taxied, and there it was, a text. "John, we need you. Something came up. You have to fly back to Australia now." Less than 8 hours later, I was back on a plane. Another 20 hours, another 9,000 miles, 18,000 miles in 48 hours because a multi-billion-dollar machine needed me. And somewhere between those flights, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had been fully present in my own life. I realized I was winning the wrong game. And when I finally stepped back and looked at it, I realized something even more unsettling. The villain in this story wasn't my boss or my company. It's the invisible scorecard. The system scores you on how fast you respond, how available you are, how much you produce. It values your utility to the machine over your value as a human being. When I flew back to Australia, I was running up the score on that false scoreboard. My boss was happy, the board was happy, but my real scorecard, the one that measures my health, my presence, and my relationship with my kids, was in a total free fall. We have been trained to optimize for the market while we starve for the soul. And most of us don't even realize we're doing it. You don't feel lost because you lost direction. You feel lost because you've been following the wrong scoreboard. We need a new metric. I call it the ROI of aliveness. Not what your life produces, but what your life actually feels like to live. If your 80-year-old self were looking at your calendar for tomorrow, how many of those wins would actually count? Corinne Lowe calls this the point board. I call it the real scoreboard. And the tragedy of modern life is this: we're winning the scoreboard while finishing life with an empty point board. And if you're hearing this and something in that feels uncomfortably true, that's not coincidence. That's awareness. And awareness is powerful, but it's also incomplete on its own. Because insight might show you the problem, but reflection is what helps you actually change it. That's one of the reasons I created The Ignited Life. Because one of the core ideas in this series, Purpose by Design, is that meaning isn't something you stumble into, it's something you build. But most people don't pause long enough to actually ask the questions that matter. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What is this all for? And does this life actually feel like mine? So, for every single episode, I'm sharing companion reflections and articles designed to help you go deeper into your own life, where meaning may be missing or unclear, what patterns may be keeping you stuck in performance without fulfillment, and how to begin reconnecting with purpose in a practical, grounded way. Because insight creates awareness, but reflection creates direction. If you want to explore the companion guide for this episode, you can visit theignitedlife.net. Now, let's come back to the question underneath all of this. If you've been living by the wrong scoreboard, how do you start changing it without blowing up your entire life? Because this is where most people get stuck. They think, I need a completely different life. I need a completely new career. I need a clean break from everything I've built. But that's not how real change works. Real change doesn't come from a dramatic reinvention. It comes from intentional reallocation. Most of us don't need a new life. We need a new way of allocating the one we already have. I want to give you something simple, something that you can actually do. Not someday, not when things calm down, but starting now. Step one is to identify your current scoreboard. What is your life actually rewarding right now? Be honest. Is it how fast you respond? How available you are? How much you produce? How on you are all the time? Write down the top 3 metrics your life is currently scoring you on, because if you don't define it, you'll keep playing it unconsciously. And that leads us to step 2. Identify your real scoreboard. Now, I want you to ask yourself a different question. If this year actually counted, what would matter? Not what looks good, not what earns approval, not what checks the boxes. What would actually count in your life? Would it be being more present with your family, taking care of your health, reconnecting with something creative, perhaps having deeper, more honest conversations? I want you to write down 3 things that would actually matter. And then finally, step 3, the 10% reallocation. Now, here's the shift. Don't try to change everything. Don't try to fix your entire life in one move. Just reallocate 10% of your time and attention from the false scoreboard to the real one. That's it. 1 hour a day or one protected block of time, a space where you're no longer optimizing for the market. You are investing in your life. And that 10%, it's not small. That's where your agency lives. That's where your identity begins to shift. That's where you stop performing your life and start actually living it. Because over time, that 10% compounds. It changes your decisions. It changes your priorities. It changes what you say yes to and what you finally have the courage to say no to. You don't need a new life. You need a new allocation of the one you already have. And eventually, if you keep reallocating, you may find yourself doing something even bigger, not out of impulse, not out of burnout, but out of clarity. So you're doing everything right. You're showing up, you're producing, you're carrying the weight of your responsibilities. And from the outside, it might look like you're winning, but now you know that's not the full story. Because if there's one thing that I learned from that moment, 18,000 miles in 48 hours, chasing a problem that wasn't even mine to carry, it's this. You can be incredibly successful and still feel like you're losing something you can't quite name. You can build a life that works on paper, but doesn't feel like your own. And the reason is simple. You're being scored by a system that doesn't measure what matters. But here's the part that matters most. You don't have to keep playing that game the same way. You don't have to tear your life down. You don't have to walk away from everything you've built. You just have to start choosing what actually counts. Because the moment you begin to shift your time, your attention, your energy, even by 10%, you start to reclaim something powerful. Your agency, your presence, your life. And over time, those small reallocations stop feeling small. They start changing how you think, how you decide, how you show up. They start changing the scoreboard itself. Because the truth is this: you don't feel lost because you lack direction. You feel lost because you've been following the wrong scoreboard. So here's what I want you to remember. You don't need a new life. You need a new way of measuring the one you already have. Because one day you'll look back on the life you've lived, and none of the metrics that once felt urgent, your responsiveness, your output, your constant availability, none of those will be what you measured it by. You'll measure it by the moments you were fully present, the people you showed up for, the parts of yourself you didn't abandon along the way. So don't wait for the system to change. Don't wait for permission, and don't wait until it's too late to realize you've been winning the wrong game. Start now, reallocate, reclaim, and begin building a life that actually feels like your own. Next week, in our series Purpose by Design, we take it one step further. I'm joined by acclaimed Stanford professor Claude Steele. In his new book, Churn, The Tension That Divides Us and How to Overcome It, Claude explores a powerful and often invisible force, the tension that arises between people of different identities in important moments. He calls it churn. It's the subtle discomfort, the self-consciousness, the unspoken pressure that shapes how we show up, often without us even realizing it. In our conversation, we explore what churn is and why it shows up in everyday interactions, how identity and perception influence behavior, and how we can reduce this tension to create more authentic connection.
Concept that we call stereotype threat. And it's a very simple idea. I think people will recognize it when they hear it, that whenever you're in a situation or you're doing something for which a negative stereotype about one of your identities, your age, your sex, your race, your religion, whenever a negative stereotype about one of those identities is relevant to what you're doing, you know that you could be judged and treated in terms of that stereotype. And if the situation is important to you, to your future, and that prospect of being seen and treated that way can be upsetting and distracting and can interfere with your performance right there in the immediate situation. And it can also deter you from walks of life where you feel that pressure.
If today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need it. Leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you're really ready to go deeper, pre-order my new book, The Mattering Effect, coming October 6th. Until next time, remember, a meaningful life isn't about doing more. It's about choosing intentionally what actually matters. I'm John Miles, and you've been Passion Struck.